What made you go all in with breathwork and facilitating breathwork training?
Truthfully, I think a year ago, I was in...
Meet Pat Divilly. He is on a mission to help people reclaim the parts of themselves they've buried by bringing light to the shadow. He uses neuroscience, somatic practices, and deep emotional integration to help people all over the world. He is a best-selling author, and in this episode, you'll learn the practical tools from his new book, Shadow Work, including how to work with shame, build self-trust, and turn your emotional wounds into your greatest strength. Enjoy this one, guys.
I was in Phuket. I went out there for a couple of months and I was doing martial arts and trying to build a new life, moving from Ireland and just wanting to change the scenery. And there was a guy who was a strength and conditioning coach in Tiger, who's just one of the big gyms out there. And he actually messaged me and he said, "Oh, you're one of the reasons I came to Thailand. I used to listen to your podcast." And I was like, wow. Because I kind of had this guy not on a pedestal, but I was like, wow, he's a top strength and conditioning coach. And I had this kind of existential crisis where I realized that 10 years ago I was doing fitness and I had this big fitness brand in Ireland. And then I kind of did what I wanted to do there. And then I moved into personal development and like hypnosis and NLP and millions of directions. And I kept changing, kept pivoting, just following my bliss kind of thing. Not very good from a business standpoint, but
good for fulfillment.
yeah, fill my soul, but it put pressure on me sometimes, or perceived pressure. So when I seen this guy, I was like, oh, this guy just stuck with fitness and now he's like a guy, he's doing it. And I'm kind of this guy that does 10 different things, all reasonably well. But if you were to ask people at home, what does Pat do? They'd be like, oh, he used to do fitness and he kind of does stuff with the mind now. And it's just not very compelling. And I started thinking about like the second half of my life. Like I'm 37. So realistically coming into the second phase. And I felt like your 20s are a lot about experimenting and trying things and making mistakes. And you'll obviously always make mistakes, but I thought like I've served my apprenticeship for the last kind of 15 to 20 years of studying and taking courses and like traveling all over the world. And there comes a time when you have to you don't have to, but I choose to take all of that stuff and bring it back to my village or my community and kind of share. So breathwork was the piece that took shadow work and inner child work and inner critic work and a bit of fitness and community. And it brought everything together. So I thought, right, I'm just going to go all in on this. And it's getting bigger. And truthfully, I was brought behind the scenes on a couple of schools to be a guest teacher. And it was kind of affirming to me that, I can do this too. Because I kept sending people to other schools.
Yeah. Because the new book is Shadow Work. How does breath work and how does that interplay? How was that the missing piece? I've done breath work, love it. Kind of dabbled into the inner child work and the some of the shadow work as well. Why is that the linking piece?
My experience was, so I did the fitness thing for a couple of years professionally and worked with a lot of people. And, I was naive at 21, 22. I thought, okay, give people a training plan and a nutrition plan and they'll get great results and I'll build a business. And of course, like some of your clients get great results, others don't. So I wanted to figure out like what's happening here. And I actually scaled the business from 5 clients to 20,000 in 4 years back in 2012 with online programs.
Amazing.
And, it was like a lot of the online fitness stuff. Like I was using Facebook groups. I had like 800 paying clients a month going through Facebook groups. It was kind of wild. Facebook used to bring me out to California to tell my story and like all this mad stuff. But I work with 20,000 clients and I'd love to say 20,000 people changed their lives, but very few really changed. And I was like, what's happening here? So I started looking at the mind. I started looking at sleep and stress and all the different factors. And then my own personal experience was struggling with self-esteem for years. And I thought when I achieve, I'll feel successful. And when I achieved everything, bought a house, bought a car, brought out books, built a business, I was like, oh, I'm not happy. Like there's something wrong here. And it was the first time I think in my life at 28 that there was nothing I could point to and say like, that's why I'm sad. Because I had everything. And at that moment, I realized that your conscious mind and goal setting and time management and all that stuff is useful, of course. And I was very good at writing things down and going after them and very linear and kind of like boom. But emotionally under the surface, there was stuff going on that was just leaving me feeling, coming from a place of wounding. That's how I put it to people. You can come from wounding or worth. Worth is I have a sense of self-worth. So I'm going to go out into the world and do things that inspire me. Wounding is there's something inherently flawed or wrong with me. So I'm going to try to cover that up with nice clothes or success or whatever it might be. And a lot of my behavior up to at least 28 was wounding, like I'm not enough. And I thought success would kind of fix my wounds and really just put a magnifying glass on my wounds. So then the shadow work came in. And the shadow work is the idea of we've all shut down kind of half of who we are. and decided it's unlovable. So my shame, my grief, my anger, my fear, aspects of my sexuality, anything I was told was unlovable gets pushed into shadows, and we kind of hide it from the world, even hide it from ourselves. And it ends up unconsciously running our lives. So breath kind of brings this stuff up. We breathe in a certain way. There's lots of different breathing techniques, but conscious connected, which I focus on, brings us into a connected breath where there's no gaps or pauses. It starts to energize the body, and the stuff that it's like a beach ball. You push that stuff under the water. The further you push it down, the more energy it builds, and eventually it's coming up. So that's the link, I would say, is what do they say? What you resist will persist.
Yeah.
If you stay in your conscious mind and you stay rational and you intellectualize your whole life, which I'm prone to doing, like I learned to live in my head to be safe, because most of us learn, don't be in your body. Don't feel sadness, don't feel anger, don't feel anything, particularly as men. Even to feel happy was too much as a boy, because you'd be teased, you know? So you learn to kind of shut it down, go to the head, live from the neck up, and you become disconnected, right? From what's true.
Yeah, it's Britain as well, right? Then what are you so happy about? Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry.
What's wrong with that
Sorry
guy?
about,
That guy loves himself, or like whatever it is.
He's enjoying himself.
So, Gabor Maté, who I trained with years ago, talks about the adapted self or the authentic self. And the idea is, as children, we're all authentic. We cry when we want to cry, when we laugh when we want to laugh. And then at some point, there's this battle that happens where I can either be myself and be authentic, or I can be accepted. And for a child, there's only really one choice. I want to be accepted.
Yeah.
So I lose myself.
Interesting. And I think it's a Peter Crone thing I've heard, where it's like you do that. You choose accepted as a child because that's what makes you feel safe. Like you don't have autonomy over your life, really. So you have to teach yourself to behave in a way that is acceptable to your parents. Otherwise you won't feel safe.
Yeah.
So you kind of link this lack of authenticity to not to feeling safe. And then so it's a hard thing to remove. Yeah. So from your book, which is coming out soon, couple of weeks. So when this podcast comes out, it'll be out. I'll link it below.
Thank you.
So just for those who don't know what shadow work is, and again for me as well, like I'm still not entirely sure. Parts of us have shamed or shunned into shadow. All parts of ourselves, even the ones that seem to want to sabotage our best efforts, are doing their best to protect and support us. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, like the industry talks about personal development and personal growth, which is kind of to come from a place of I'm not enough as it is, but if I develop and I grow, I'll be enough. Which to some degree is useful. I think everything works until it doesn't work. But if your whole kind of frame that you're coming from is I need to improve, get better and grow, inherently there's a sense of there's something inherently wrong with me. And so my take is more about self-understanding and self-awareness. So while many people might see their inner critic as something to get past or something to challenge or something they need to beat or something that's in the way, I try to work with the inner critic and recognize the inner critic is a protective part of me, where at some point in my life, I experienced pain because I tried to stand out. And when I stood out, this part developed, my inner critic, and said, I'm going to keep you safe. I'm going to be a gatekeeper so that if you step out of things again and try to be different, I'll remind you that that's not safe by giving you critical internal narratives. So taking this approach and actually leaning toward our parts, I can actually start to converse with my inner critic, my perfectionist, my inner child. And really, it's about understanding them. Like in one way I think about it, that people talk about inner child a lot. I think about the wounded little boy that was scared, and then almost teenage parts that come in to protect it. So the teenage parts are the tough guy, the funny guy, the bully, the people pleaser, and then there's the healthy adult man. And I think man psychology or grown-up psychology is about being able to step back, take a breath, recognize who's showing up in any given moment. And if it's the hormonal teenager who's trying to protect the little boy, or it's the little boy that's feeling scared of the world, I want to be able to kind of make a new choice. People talk about react or respond all the time. React is when you're stuck in your past. Respond is when you're present to the moment. And one piece I often share is that we all grow up biologically, so we all get older. I was in the barber the other day. I was like, fuck, I'm getting old. Looking at myself in the mirror.
You look good, brother.
Thank you. But we all grow up biologically and get older, but psychologically we get stuck. So I've worked with guys in their 60s, 70s, and 80s that as little boys took on a story that for me to be of value, I've got to achieve. And now they're men with kids and grandkids who can't connect with their family because they don't know how to connect, because the only way they can operate is to be in achievement mode, to be in a constant state of doing. So it's, again, everything works until it doesn't work. And I think when you get to your 30s, for me at least, it was kind of recognizing that, okay, what's gotten me here isn't going to get me to the next kind of stage of personally where I want to go, at least.
So there's that other quote again where it's like, life will present you with circumstances and people to show you where you're not free.
Yeah.
But what does it mean to be free?
What does it mean to be free? I think it's in internal games where it's like, can I be comfortable with all aspects of myself? If I've shut down a lot of my aspects, so let's say grief, so I don't allow myself to feel grief or sadness because that's not manly, or whatever message I took on when I was young. The way we can think of it, as a child, it's very black and white. Something happens and you put things in a good box or a bad box. I cry in front of the boys in school and it goes in the bad box. Never do that again. But then 30 years later, I'm in a relationship and my partner just feels like I can't be vulnerable, I can't connect. And so I think that's the opportunity to take it out of the bad box and not make it really good, but say this is a neutral experience. Like grief is very appropriate at certain times. If I've shut down my grief, I will unconsciously set up my whole life in a way that I never have to meet that part of myself. If I shut down my fear, which is maybe an obvious one for a lot of people, I will set up my whole life that I don't put myself in situations that are scary. So the more of myself I've shut down, the smaller my external world becomes. So I think to be free is knowing that I can meet any aspect of my internal experience and not have to run from it or numb from it or avoid it. Yeah, that's what I see freedom as,
so
at least.
Another line from your book.
Sounds like a good book.
It was a good book, bro. It was awesome. We cannot heal what we cannot feel. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget.
Yeah.
That's a cool line as well. That's a great line. We cannot heal what we cannot feel. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Now, you already spoke about that a little bit there. You kind of teased it, kind of like the grief, the shame, which are obviously very uncomfortable emotions to feel.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of like the question from there is, how do you go about feeling those emotions safely and giving yourself that space to process them without them just kind of coming back up, and then maybe the critic comes back in, like, oh yeah, this is, you want to remember all that shame? Yeah. And it just kind of, you just go back into it. Yeah. Is that where the breath work comes in? Yeah. How does that work?
Yeah, I can do, for sure. One example I'll maybe just share that might kind of give a bit of a map as to how I see this whole thing, which isn't necessarily the right map, but it's how I make sense of this stuff. We've got the mind-body connection, so my thoughts are constantly having an impact on how I feel in my body. When I have a thought of I'm not liked, it's going to create tension in my body, and my body becomes constricted and I become small. When I have a belief that people appreciate and respect me, then I'm expansive in terms of energy. So the mind is always talking to the body. Sorry, the mind is always talking to the body, but also the body is always talking to the mind. 80% of the signals are going this way, meaning if I step into a room, unconsciously everything is safe in the room, but I start feeling anxiety, there's a memory that's been stored within my body that's sending a signal to my brain, which will create a story that there's something dangerous in the room. And this comes from our past. So the way I think about it is, if you imagine a child being bullied, in that moment, two things happen. The first is they have a freeze response. There's fight or flight energy that comes to keep them safe, but they can't mobilize that energy. They can't run and they can't fight. It makes more sense just to freeze because they're surrounded by bullies, for example. And so the body tenses, the breath stops, and this is lodged in the nervous system. This becomes an implicit memory or a held memory in the body. That's the bodily response. The psyche then creates a character and says, I don't want this ever to happen again. So I'm going to adapt who I am so that this doesn't happen again. So I've had this bodily memory that'll be held in the body, and then I've got a protective part that comes online to keep me safe. So people pleaser, bully, whatever it is, my adaptive strategy. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Could be that 10 years later, I'll walk into a room, something triggers a similar sensation in my body to what was experienced when I was bullied. And suddenly I've noticed my protective parts and I'm acting out of sorts. I'm acting irrationally. So to your question then about feeling and healing, not to go too far off kilter, but there's a famous psychotherapist or psychiatrist in Ireland. He passed away last year, Ivor Brown, amazing man. And something he used to talk about was the unexperienced experience. And the idea is when painful things happen to us, we kind of shut down and don't want to feel it, or oftentimes we dissociate and we kind of leave because it's too much. And so we have this painful experience and we remember it, but it was never fully felt. You know what I mean? Like if I experience abuse, there's a part of me that like leaves my body because it's too much to feel. And so there's this kind of unfinished loop, and this holds a lot of energy in our system. So in the care of maybe a therapist or a coach or a breathwork experience or whatever it might be, people will have different ways of feeling their work. Yeah, I think it starts with like slowly dipping into those things. Think about it like a fizzy bottle of Coke, right? If you shake up the bottle of Coke and you open it, it's going to go everywhere. It's going to make a mess. That's how trauma healing is. You got to kind of open it up, close it back down, open it up a little more, close it back down. So little bits. I think you can't come into your true inner work with ambition. That'll get in the way. Like trying to make it linear, trying to fix yourself, any of that. You got to approach it with curiosity. But the breathwork can be a great tool, in short.
I'm the most healed.
Yeah. I'm the most healed. Now I can sell something off the back of it, yeah.
My question there is around the release. Because let's say something traumatic did happen. The release of it, the thing still happened. So how does kind of feeling the emotion, why is that healing? Like, is it just a bodily thing, or it's like, oh, the body holds the score. Oh, we let go of this. It's out. How do you reconcile that with the mind? Because perhaps the memories are still there. Do you then meet the memories with love? There's like more compassion where you're like, oh, I understand why that person did that thing to me, and then you're at peace with it, perhaps. But yeah, I'm always curious there, and also by replaying it. So let's say I did a breath work and I kind of felt like I let go of a lot of stuff. But kind of the memory's still present. What happens? Is there like a rewiring, a reassociating with the memory? Can the memory itself kind of re-engrave a bit of the trauma if you don't continue the work?
Sure.
Yeah,
a couple of things. So one lens, there's lots of different lenses through which I would see this. There's a famous psychotherapist called Alexander Lowen, who worked a lot with the body back in the 70s and 80s, bioenergetics, which is, I think it's having a bit of a resurgence, but the idea was we work with the body rather than just the mind with regard to psychotherapy and working through our stuff. And through his lens, which I would kind of feed into, it's the idea that I suppose, okay, something difficult happens, and it could be I walk out onto the street in Canggu and a motorbike pulls out in front of me and I freeze. There's a big surge of energy telling me jump out of the way of the bike, but I'm overwhelmed and I freeze. And so I've had this massive surge of energy. I've had a tension in my body. I've had my breath stop. And in theory, that energy becomes lodged. So the tension that's held in my body doesn't ever leave because I'm in a chronic state of that tension. And so with something like a breath work, as I breathe into the spaces, first I start to notice the tension. Different breath workers work in different ways, but I typically work with notice the sensations in your body. Okay, there's tension in the chest. Can we breathe into that tension? Sometimes memories will come of what this might represent. Sometimes there's also a thing of false memories, which is like people will imagine things that or hear things based on what other people have said. But as I start to soften, the idea will be that with feelings I didn't want to feel or didn't have the space to feel in the past, I will have physically armored around the feeling to stop myself. So the little boy told boys don't cry, you'll see him go, and almost swallow the feeling. And so there's a tension created, and then chronic tension patterns can hold the emotions. So as the body starts to loosen through something like breath work, there's a potential that the energy can move. If you think of it as energy rather than emotion. And then in terms of like re-traumatization, trauma will typically occur when something is too much, too fast, or too soon to be integrated in the moment. Most traumas will come down to that. You know, someone came and touched me too fast. It would usually be okay, but it was too much and I didn't expect it. There was too much of something happening at a given time, or there was not enough. So if there was neglect, that would be another example of trauma. But in all trauma, there's typically a disconnection that occurs. So there's I'm not in connection with anyone else. There's a sense of isolation. And so for healing to occur, it's important that the therapist or the coach or whoever's involved is able to hold a loving presence to whatever is happening, because that's what wasn't there in the first place. If a boy cried as a boy and he was met with loving presence and celebrated for his tears, there's no trauma. Trauma happens when he's shut down or shamed. So re-traumatization will happen in the absence of loving presence. If we can't hold that for ourselves, we need someone else to support us, I think, with it.
Doesn't a certain amount of trauma make you interesting?
Yeah.
I'll give the example, like what comes to mind. Let's say a comedian or an artist. A lot of art is perhaps a way of processing pain, turning it into something powerful. And you look at someone, let's say Kurt Cobain, clearly had a lot of stuff that was unprocessed and it ended up killing him. That's not good. But there's the body of music. He wouldn't have created that without the pain.
Sure.
So I guess there's like an interesting sort of moral dilemma there. Did he give his life for his art, and his art has been very healing to many people, let's say. I'm just throwing this out as like devil's advocate, because I often think with like comedians as well, what makes them funny is like their flaws and
they're some of the darkest people you meet.
Some of the darkest people you meet. So I don't know, where do you see the balance there of, okay, like healing, but also, you know, we are humans and have a bit of a personality. Be a bit of a messed up human, because what else are you going to do? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I wonder, do artists and musicians and comedians actually feel more than most? You know, they'll actually drop into it and allow themselves to be taken over by whatever the energy is or the emotion is, and that becomes the fuel. Whereas maybe the opposite is, okay, I'm just going to outdrink this feeling, or I'm going to push this away, or I'll deal with this later. For me, I mean, that is therapeutic work for them with the work that they're putting out into the world, and they're alchemizing and transmuting the pain into something beautiful. So I would say they're some of the best people we could study. You think about, you know, I work with the archetypes sometimes, the different energies that we have as humans. And with most archetypes, there'll be an emotion associated. So the warrior energy is about anger. The unhealthy expressions of anger will tend to be underexpression, where I'm disconnected from it, or overexpression, where I've got no control over it. So like the bully and the people pleaser. And so to find your middle ground is to like become clean with your anger. I would say artists and comedians and stuff actually do that beautifully, where they're not shutting down this pain. Maybe sometimes they're becoming overindulgent in the pain and stuck in the pain, but ultimately their healing comes from kind of integrating it, you know? Like, can I bring beauty out of the pain? Yeah.
Are relationships necessary?
Yes.
For healing? Can you heal fully without relationships?
No.
What do you mean?
No, that's the full answer. So I saw, is there an Instagram worthy quote that says something like, "You're not fully healed, you're just avoiding any situation that could potentially trigger you." There's something like that. I remember during, I think it was the first lockdown, I did a lot of work. I mean, I'm doing this stuff for a long time, but I was deep in Gabor Maté's work. I was deep in trauma release work. I was doing a lot of personal work. And I was thinking, wow, I'm moving past some good stuff here, you know? But I was locked in my house for a year, you know? As soon as I went back into the social environment, it was like, oh, here's my stuff. Sometimes when I run workshops, people will be surprised. They'll say to me at the end of the workshop, "I'm amazed how open I was with a complete stranger." You know, I'll sometimes get people talking to each other or sharing bits and pieces. And I'm never surprised, because it's not that scary to share with a stranger, but it's scary to share with someone who gets close. So I think the closer someone comes, oftentimes the closer they'll mirror the relationship we had to our parents, maybe, for example. So all your old stuff comes up. Typically in an intimate relationship, it's your relationship with your parents that manifests in the intimate relationship. You can talk about that if you like, but...
yeah, well, I think it's interesting. I've given this example before on the pod, but someone I learned this from was Teal Swan, and I've just kind of re-entered into a relationship after a long hiatus from any real deeper connection. And exactly your insight, you know, I healed myself and I was super stoic, and I'd done all this work outside of a relationship, and nothing could bother me. I'm peaceful, and I'm, you know, build a little bit of an ego around that, if I'm honest. You know, people would be like, "Oh, Tom, you're so stoic." I'm like, yes, that's right. That is right. But I'm avoiding the work. I'm avoiding kind of entering back into, basically I was really hurt in a romantic relationship a number of years ago, which was a great lesson. But I did healing outside of it. And then like, I was scared to get back in a relationship, you know, because that's where the real work was. And I always give the example of like, if you had a traumatic experience in water, you can avoid water the rest of your life and be like, oh, I'm fine. But in order to actually overcome your fear of water or the ocean or a swimming pool, you've got to get back in. You have to have a different experience where you perhaps feel safe, or you can just avoid it. And I was, if I'm honest, even though, you know, I could say, oh, look, I'm fine and I'm dealing with things so well, I was avoiding the work. And then, you get back into a relationship and all that. It's like, hello, my old friend.
yeah. Because
Hello.
It's your mirror, right?
Yeah.
Like the hippies, I shouldn't say hippies, but like a lot of people call it your sacred mirror. Like this is going to be the person who's going to... There's a nice frame that I think is useful, and it talks about 3 stages of relationships. So your first stage is romantic love, which is like the honeymoon period. You have a sense that this person completes me. You feel whole. you're projecting all your gold onto them. Typically, you don't see any of the kind of the challenges. But then after, I don't know, 6 months, 12 months, I think the older you get, the shorter that kind of honeymoon period becomes. But you wake up, yeah, hopeless podcast. But you wake up one morning and you realize, oh, this person is he's a unique sovereign being that is not just put here to like fix me or to be my everything. And so you start to see, I don't know, whatever their little flaws are and stuff. And then you enter what they call the power struggle. And the power struggle is where there's a bit of kind of back and forth and maybe projection from previous relationships, all that kind of thing. There's 4 ways people respond to the power struggle. The first is they become a cold couple, which means they stay together, but all intimacy and friendship is lost and they just kind of walk side by side and stay together for convenience. The second is a hot couple, meaning they just fight all the time and they stay together. The third is they finish and say, this is not the right thing. And they say the fourth then is conscious love, which is where you recognize, okay, we're bringing up each other's stuff so that we can work with it and both grow. Easier said than done.
It's that, well, love is a verb, right? It's not that you fall in love with someone, it's someone's in front of you. Anyone could be the right one. But it's, am I going to, in all of my triggers, in all of the situations, am I going to meet it with love? That's what love is. It's not something you get from them, an agreement or, was it a John Mayer song? Like, love is a verb.
It sounds like it,
yeah. It would be a John Mayer song.
But you mentioned Teal Swan there. I haven't looked at a lot of her stuff, but she did have one line that I thought was really genius. She said, sometimes in relationship, when we say, I need some space, she said, really what we're saying is, I'm terrified of you seeing this part of me.
Ooh.
So maybe I feel anxious and I'll say, I just need some space. But really, I'm afraid if you see my anxiety, you won't love me and you'll leave.
I need some space is often the same as I'm afraid of you seeing this part of me.
What's actually here. I know you like me when I'm fun and I'm playful and I'm outgoing, but now you're meeting the real me, so I need some space.
How do you do that in relationships when that comes up? How do you yourself, or perhaps working with people as well, how do you recognize like your triggers there and then choose to like narrow the gap from kind of separation to connection? So rather than kind of sit with something like that and be triggered and take yourself away, I need some space and
Yeah.
Any processes for kind of like dissolving that tension immediately or as close to immediately as possible? Because that sounds worth doing.
Yeah. I'll frame this. Whenever I'm doing like corporate talks and stuff and people ask about parenting advice, I'm like, I've never been a parent. So I'll make it and in relationship, I'm definitely no expert in lived experience of relationship, but I've studied, a good amount. So it's somewhat intellectual, but sometimes I can use the tools well. There's a few things. One is the Gottman Institute, John and Julie Gottman. Ever come across them? It's pretty wild, the work they were doing. They basically had like a Big Brother house years ago. Couples would go and stay there for weeks at a time, and they would track the couples like blood levels a couple of times a day, check how stressed they were, and they had them on camera and they'd watch everything. And they started seeing the subtleties to a scarily accurate degree that, okay, if she says, hey, look out the window, and he doesn't acknowledge, they're probably going to, not work out in the long term. But they come up with this concept of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, just kind of like basically defense strategies when we feel triggered or in conflict. And the 4 were, first is if we get into conflict, my response is to criticize.
Yep.
So I'll start judging you, attacking you. The second is contempt. So I'll really make you small. I'll be sarcastic. I'll be mocking. I take it a step further. The third is defensiveness. So, I got stuck in traffic today and I turned up late. If you were to bring that up as a thing, and I was to talk about how hard things have been for me and just try to defend myself, I'm not really addressing what you've brought. So I'm just making it about myself. So that's defensiveness. It's my pattern. And then the fourth will be stonewalling. So I feel emotionally flooded and overwhelmed by conflict. And so my head says anything I say is going to be wrong. So I'm just going to shut down.
Yeah.
So it's good to know your pattern. That's one piece I think that can be useful.
Really interesting. I'd say my pattern, if I'm honest, is I go quiet. If it's something, I go quiet. I don't know what that falls into. And it's something that I'm aware of and I work through quicker. And like, again, it's that thing of like, it's kind of reconciling this because there's a lot of sort of masculinity stuff I've studied as well, classic like David Dieter stuff, Coach Corey Wayne. And like, I grew up on that early 20s. There is, how do you see this balance of, and I feel like I'm getting to the stage where I walk this quite well now, but I don't really know how to kind of describe it, because I do believe as a man, like sometimes you do have to just swallow the shit and you have to be the leader in situations. And to be honest, no, your emotions don't fucking matter. And sometimes like you've got to play that role, I believe,
Sure.
For your woman to feel safe. But then also for kind of that deep connection that I know I want, vulnerability is key. So the way that I kind of approach that currently is that I think it's important to be honest and vulnerable about either things that have triggered me, perhaps what is brought up. But I'll always approach it with kind of a plan forward as well. I'm not kind of saying like, hey, can you just listen? I've got problems. It's like, hey, this is coming up. This is interesting. I think this is why this has come up. What do you think? And like also, I guess like providing sort of some way that, hey, this will be worked on like this, or because how do you see that balance? Because I think that's a bit of a conflicting thing when people start doing like this more inner work and being vulnerable. Can you go too far the other way? And then like, with a partner, you're just like, you're now treating them as a mummy, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think this is the importance of proper men's groups for men. There's a lot of different types of men's groups. There's connection groups, and which is nice. And there's, people that go swimming or running together or whatever it is. But a proper men's group, in my judgment, is something a little bit deeper, where that's a place where you can go and you can kind of process some of your stuff. And if there's stuff that you work through and you still need to bring it to your partner, then you bring it, and maybe she has somewhere that she brings her stuff.
Yeah.
I think the biggest challenge in the modern world is we grew up in villages, and there was more community around and family around. And now a lot of us have an expectation on our partner that they're going to be our lover, our best friend, our agony aunt. So I think it's important to have different spaces. I think nonviolent communication is quite a good model for communication. Have you come across that? In very simple terms, violent communication will be, you piss me off.
Yeah.
Nonviolent will be, first, I own my own feelings. So I felt angry. And then you connect the feeling to a need. So you needed something. That's why you felt angry. So I needed to be heard. And then you would make a request. So going forward, when we're out for dinner and I'm talking, could you not speak over me? Or something like this. So you kind of state what happened. That's the bit I skipped over. So last night when we went for dinner, I noticed, and you keep it fairly, what a camera would have seen, take the judgments out of it. This is how I felt. This is what I need. Would it be possible going forward to do this? So it's very much owning your experience, a different language too. And the vulnerability of that. I remember, being in men's groups years ago, and we'd stand in a circle at the start of the session, and you'd look each man in the eyes. And if you had any emotional reaction to any of the men, you'd do a process and you'd tell them what you judged about them. So I don't feel safe around you. And then you'd have to go through a process. And the idea was to clear. And it was interesting because sometimes like I'd be triggered by someone, for example, and you'd be honest and you'd say, there's something coming up for me. I don't even know what it is, but I just don't like you. And you opposite the man, and you start going, okay, below the judgment, what is your feeling? Or what is your story? So my story is, this man doesn't respect me. And then they say, what's the feeling when you believe another man doesn't respect you? I feel sad and I feel scared. So that's really what's going on. So what part of you is that? That's my 9-year-old self. So really, it's not a lot to do with this man. And the same in relationship. So I think it can be useful. Okay, I'm triggered. What's the story I'm telling myself about the situation? What's the feeling below the story? And is there a need connected to that feeling? So story is, my partner doesn't respect me. The feeling is sadness. The need is to feel respected. Can I communicate that rather than pointing fingers? I'm still working on this stuff.
Yes, great, man. So something I heard once, and but it's we basically adopt our parents' nervous systems the first few years of our life, right? Because that's all we know. So that's what messes us up a lot of times. And all the child stuff we feel when we're shouted at, when we didn't feel heard, everything comes from childhood there. And again, I guess my question is around like this healing thing. Let's say there's two parents who are more healed, whatever. Isn't it necessary to fuck up a kid a little bit? Isn't that the work? Do you know what I mean? Like, isn't that like, I don't know what my question is there, but isn't that kind of part of the human experience, is that you come in with, you pick certain parents, your soul picks certain parents, and it goes, they're going to mess me up in this way. And it's kind of more like a puzzle to unpick. It's like, it's kind of how I view it, right? It's like a soul comes down, and they're like, oh, how do I want to scramble the Rubik's Cube this time? Like, I should pick a really challenging one. And I guess like, I don't know, I'd love to hear your thoughts there about how does this healing thing work? Like, is there some end goal of like utopic, everyone's just vibrating and emanating gold light? And is that the point? Or do you know what I mean? Because like, I do believe that like a lot of this human experience and what I've kind of come to terms with as well is like, enjoy the messed up fucking parts of it. It's what makes it fun. Like, kind of under it all, it doesn't matter really. Like, it's all love, everything's good. I've had some interesting psychedelic experiences that have made me feel very safe and very held, and kind of realized there's just nothing to fear.
I
had a very potent one once, and just the underlying feeling that came back was like, you're so safe. Like, what are you worried about? And that's a very, it's a beautiful experience. But then it kind of made me appreciate like the human game a little bit more. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, like this is a bit messed up, and like, oh, I am triggered, or like, oh, this, and oh yeah, I get to feel being a human. And as well, healing is important, but also soaking up the flavors of being a human is also kind of part of the reason that for existence as well. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know what your thoughts are there.
I 100% agree. A lot of spiritual work traditionally. I'm going to go to Ubud tomorrow, so I'll be seeing some of this probably tomorrow. But, but a lot of it's about ascension, right? So it's about going up, love and light, getting, having this spiritual experience. Like, that's the goal of a lot of spiritual practice. Reality for a lot of people is, one of my mentors calls it dissociation in holy ropes. So I'm going to meditate away from the reality of my life, and I'm not going to acknowledge what's real. So the other type of spiritual work, which for me is shadow work, is I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. So let's be a human and actually stay in the body. So I put up a post yesterday from a friend of mine, Xavier. He's an amazing writer on Instagram. And it was something like, if you think having an outer body experience is epic, try being in your body, And it's kind of, I think we're saying similar things in different language, but it's like, okay, if the human experience is to be fucked up and messed up and messy and weird and all this kind of stuff, how much of that range of experiences can I actually feel versus how much of it do I have to numb to? So if I don't heal to some degree, or don't focus on that piece, I can never really open my heart to love. So I never get to have the full experience of love. If I don't heal my relationship to anger, I can never put a boundary in place. So I can never truly be myself and truly express myself. So I think it's a balance. Sometimes people ask me, they're like, could you get lost in this stuff? I'm like, hell yeah, you can get lost in this stuff. So how do you approach it? It's like, just look at your life, and your life is giving you, probably Peter Crone kind of stuff, like your life is giving you a set of experiences right now, some of which are difficult, some of which are enjoyable. That's feedback as to things that are working and things that are not working. Just work with what's in front of you. You don't even have to go back to your past. Life will give you something, and then you recognize, okay, there's something here to work with.
So we're on the physical plane, right? I think it's an Esther Hicks thing, Abraham Esther Hicks. And she's like, everything's, so we learn through opposites. We're in the plane of duality over here. And it's like that feeling of heartbreak or that feeling of scarcity, fuck yeah. Because now this end of the spectrum, that opens you up to the other end. But without it, you wouldn't know. And this is why like every entrepreneur, including myself, I've met, has gone broke at some point. And I've felt it. But that contrast, the scarcity and the abundance, it's the same thing. It's just, I'm kind of over here. And it's like, when if I'm feeling in scarcity, which luckily isn't something that, even though it was couple of years ago, like definitely in scarcity all of the time. Like, if that ever comes up, a scarce feeling, it's like, I'm aware of it. And the way I visualize it is just tilting back. And it's like, I'm on the same set of scales. I'm on the same plane. Okay, what do I want to feel? And just kind of like moving back, and oh yeah, there it is. And I found that's quite helpful as a like way of illustrating it. But yeah, like that's part of the thing, like we said, with like this human experiences, you've got to learn through the contrast. You've got to go and be a human and roll around in it and have some human stuff happen. And that's part of that's part of the joy of it all. And it's funny, I was listening to, Duncan Trussell.
Yeah, I've not heard a lot of his stuff. He's a psychedelic, right? Or psychoanalyst, right?
I know him from like Joe Rogan. He's just a wacky character. He did those cartoons on Netflix called Midnight Gospels.
Okay.
Awesome, man. It was an awesome. You should definitely watch them. Okay. He did an audio podcast for many years, so there's no video to go along with it. And what they did is they took snippets from his audio podcast and they kind of made it into a narration.
I've seen those, yeah.
And beautiful. And there's one with his mother that everyone should watch because his mum was about to die from cancer. And it's such a human moment where she was very kind of spiritually involved. And there's this beautiful moment where he's talking to his mother on the podcast, and they're talking very high level about what will happen after death, and she's like, it's all love, it's all fine. And then he's like, but it sucks for me, I'm knowing that you're going to go. And she just kind of pauses, and he's like, what do I do? And she just kind of has this beautiful motherly moment. She's like, you cry, you feel it. It's such a beautiful moment, man. Like, it gives me shivers when I listen to that every now and then. He's cool. He's awesome. He's a funny character. It's funny. He said something on a podcast the other day. I saw a clip of it, and it was kind of around this idea of like God and oneness, right? And he said like he did this exercise at a Ram Dass retreat, and they were like, all one. If you remove one L, that's alone. So all one is like alone. And he said it was an interesting take. He was like, this poor God that is like all one alone was so alone that it made this like universe and kind of wanted to have these experiences and forget that it was all one, forget that it was alone.
Yes. Have
you seen this?
Yeah, I've seen something like this.
That it could feel company. And then he was like, when I do the psychedelics now and I feel that all oneness, that deep aloneness, I'm like, fuck, I'm back here. Fuck, this wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to be a human. I wanted to feel company. I wanted to feel love. And it was a really interesting kind of take, and like similar to what you said with like hey, you can disassociate. But like, is that really what we want? Like, I don't know.
I saw a thing recently, and it was like a lot of this stuff is easier to hear than it is to practice, of course. But the guy was basically saying, if you're in heartbreak, like how much can you feel the heartbreak, and just remind yourself you may never experience this for years, so can you enjoy it? It's like, nice in theory, difficult in practice, but it makes sense. I've an interest in you mentioned Ram Dass a couple of years ago, probably quite a while ago now. I was over in Texas with a group with Aubrey Marcus, podcaster out there, and people started talking about Ram. I think it was back then that I started hearing about Ram. And I didn't think anything of it, so I came home and like found his website, and I emailed them, and I was like, "Hey, any chance I can like come and meet Ram?" And they were like, "Yeah, no worries. He's in Hawaii." I said, "Does he do virtual sessions?" So they organized a virtual 1-to-1. And it was
you had a 1-to-1 with Ram Dass.
I'll tell you how I didn't is the bad part of the end. They booked it in for like 3 a.m. or something because the time difference. So I sat there and I was like, what do you ask an enlightened being? Because he pretty much, enlightened. I didn't know much about him, but I just obviously connected. I was like, wow, he's a beautiful man. And I spent a month trying to think like, what do you ask? You get a couple of minutes with an enlightened person. What do you do? Obviously, I think you just sit in their energy. That's probably the answer. But then they deferred the call because he got sick and then he passed. So it never happened. But I was, maybe there's something in it to be naive and just like to ask for things, because I didn't realize he was, as big as he was and stuff. But what an epic guy. And interesting, like him and Timothy Leary, you've probably seen all their story. I pendulate between the two, where I'm like, I used to think Ram was awesome because he went this pure route, and he went to India and learned to meditate. And then Tim's this renegade that went in and out of jail and was the party guy. I like the two parts. It's like channeling those. I think that's why we're inspired by people, that we see a part of ourselves in it.
Yeah. I often bring him up on the podcast, but George Gurdjieff.
Oh yeah.
Gurdjieff. George Gurdjieff. I always say his name wrong. He's fucking cool because he was like an enlightened being, but he smoked cigarettes and drank alcohol.
Yeah,
and like what I like about him is he kind of played the jester or the Joker archetype, and he just made his whole life about being a trigger. Like, you just be with him, and his spiritual work with you was like, let's find your fucking trigger then. And like, but he wouldn't do it. He knew what was going on. They say he had like some kind of like psychic abilities as well, perhaps, I don't know. But he was really good at pinpointing and creating situations where he's like, I'm going to trigger you because that's your work. And his whole thing was called the fourth way. And his whole thing was people ignore the possible to focus on the impossible. And I think that goes back to like the spiritual bypassing, the kind of ascension. I'm a vibrating all one being. But his whole thing was like, the work's in front of you. And I'm going to find it. It's there. You think you're like, there's some spiritual enlightened being now, let's find your work. And I love that he kind of made his whole thing about being a trigger.
Yeah, yeah.
People. He would punch people.
Osho was kind of the same.
Yeah.
That's the way my way of seeing Osho, at least. He wants everyone else to like live a humble life, and he's got 60 Rolls Royces and $1 million watch on his wrist.
Yeah.
And he would just say things to piss people off, I think.
It's fucking good. I think someone should write a book called The Monk Who Bought a Ferrari.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, fuck it, I have a Ferrari. Like, why can't I do that?
Copyright that.
Oh man, I love these guys. Is there any other like spiritual mentors that, yeah, you found solace in or who have really inspired you? And
I had an Osho phase. Like I trained with Osho's body worker and learned the Osho massage for a couple of weeks a couple of years ago. So I liked Osho for a while. He's quite a controversial one. You know, there was some dodgy stuff going on in his communes, but who else? Byron Katie, I'm a huge fan of, like questioning your beliefs and just recognizing. I spent a year doing she's got a process called the work. So you isolate a belief and you work through the belief. Is it true? Can I absolutely know it's true? How do I feel when I believe it's true? How do I feel when it's not true? And then you turn it on its head. So if my belief is people don't like me, I write about how I feel. I write about the impact it has on me. Then I flip it on its head. I say people do like me. And then I put the evidence that I can find. And then I say, I like myself or I don't like myself. And you look at things from lots of different angles. I think doing a year of that really supported me and just being a bit quicker at like when a stressful thought comes in, it's like, oh, it may or may not be true. There's something in it. So Byron Katie, Robert Masters, he's one of my mentors. He wrote a book called Spiritual Bypassing. He's in his 80s now. He's based in America. Stuart Wilde, he's like a metaphysics teacher. He died, I think, 1990, English guy.
Yeah.
He's like that. He's a jester and a joker. He'd be hammered up on stage telling stories and just like, yeah, he's cool, man. You should check him out.
That's fucking awesome, man. Yeah, I love this idea of like the work and it's all in front of you. Like something I've noticed, because for a bit of context, like I had my first kind of businesses and a lot of them were built out of scarcity and lack and needing to prove myself. And some of them went well, some of them didn't go well, some of them crashed and burned, some of them gave me the best connections I've ever had. But since kind of like being on this path and working with a lot of entrepreneurs, sometimes I struggle with, look, I can help people make money online. I've been doing it for years now. Like clients come to us, know how to scale businesses now. I've worked with like so many entrepreneurs. I love it. It's great fun. But this kind of question of like, I don't like using the word alignment because sometimes I think people just need to actually make some money and not worry about, is it aligned? Sometimes like just get the thorn out of your side.
Yeah.
That is important. But like, I can't see it with like a lot of the higher level guys that I've met and, you know, become somewhat friends with. I can't help but see now that they're still creating out of a state of not good enoughness. And for me, it's kind of been interesting to pivot and be like, well, what's the work that I want to do now moving forward? These guys have like all the money in the world and they can continue to like, you know, your whatever state you create from, you like perpetuate when it's reflected back to you. You know, if you come from a place of like perhaps in your childhood of needing to feel stressed, you'll create a business that makes you feel stressed.
Yeah.
But when you've created a business that is kind of built around that and propagating that rather than healing that thing, I'm interested in like how you would approach this on helping entrepreneurs deal with that, but also not burning down their businesses in the process. Because like continuing to integrate and grow rather than doing like this thing we see a lot of successful entrepreneurs do is they go 3D, money, business, and then they're like, this is not satisfying me. Disappear for 6 months, grow their hair, you know, Buddhist Theravada fucking monk. And it's like, is there an in-between? Do you know what I mean? How would you approach that?
I am a man of extremes. Probably to some degree, I do envy people that are quite like, you know, level and just go and do a meditation retreat and then drop back into their business. I've walked away from a few businesses once I've kind of felt, because similar to what you shared earlier about the soul coming down, that's my belief about life. We're given a body. We're going to give you a bunch of experiences in this lifetime. Each experience will teach you a lesson. Once you have the lesson, you can repeat the lesson or you can move on. So I grew a business. It was very successful. It wasn't it. And so I peeled that layer of the onion, walked away, gave the gym to my friend, gave my online business away, just like done. So I burnt the bridges a couple of times. I remember having an email list of 25,000 people. I was just like, okay, I'm going to delete this because, you know, I want to start again. So stupid, you know, but so maybe I'm not the guy to answer.
I've done similar things, bro. Don't worry,
and I don't, you know, it just is, you know, I'd like, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'd love to be different. I'd love to, you know, be more strategic. I'd love to, but I don't know. I am the way I am. I like the way I am. What's the answer? I mean, in reality, it probably starts with simple things like a day off your phone a week, a journaling practice. Morning pages is a really, really powerful practice. So 20 minutes every morning, take a pen and paper and just write for 3 pages, and don't put whatever's on your brain and whatever's on your heart, whatever's on your mind. Close it, don't read it, and just let it be there. You do that every day, the same stuff's going to keep coming up and your clarity will come through crystal clear. The thing I see now, old man, like 37, I think, but I'm a long time in the online space, I suppose. I started selling 2010, maybe a little bit later, 2011, 2012. But back then there wasn't that many doing it. And so the alignment piece, I don't see many people using their creativity in terms of like doing what actually feels true for them and living the way they want to live. I see a lot of people following other people, which I don't have any, like, there's no judgment on that. If that's what people want to do, I just can't help. I have this thought that we're all like an apple tree and our purpose is to grow apples and to let them fall and then more apples come. And so you're supposed to express whatever your gift is. And if you don't express that gift and you hold on to the apples, you get sick. So we've got to express it. So I think the lack of alignment, my way of defining that would be people are not sharing their gift in the way because they're obsessed with the numbers or keeping up with. Even like when I was in Thailand last year, we started talking about that. You know, I was looking at business owners around me and how much money, and it completely skewed my perception of what was actually. Everyone's talking about multi 6 figures a month and stuff, and I'm like, oh fuck, I'm gonna go broke because I'm not making multi 6 figures a month. I was like, no, I'm doing fine, you know. So I think it's on a very simple level. It's creating space to listen to the deeper voice in you. There's a deep voice within all of us that has crystal clear clarity, and it's been drowned out by social media and noise and the judgments of our parents and our conditioning and all that stuff. So make 15 minutes a day to listen to yourself and listen and take action on the insights that come through. I think that's what you do.
I love that. The morning pages, Julia Cameron.
Yeah.
There's something I do, which has been, I teach this to a few people. I do a journaling practice and I write down every morning, I write down where, how, and thanks. And it's essentially vision, action, gratitude. Nice. And I find it really powerful. And again, it's a no judgment. So I write down where, and where's like, what am I working on? What am I trying to work towards? What do I want to feel? What do I want to experience? No judgment, comes out, kind of like the morning pages.
Cool.
And then after that, I write how, ? And I'm like, well, how would I do that today? What things would I work on? What's like the 3D actionable side of that vision? And then and they have to be linked, right? So I go through point 1, what was my where, right? Well, what action would align with that?
Okay.
And then underneath is the thanks, the gratitude, linked to that where, what can I be grateful for that I already have at the moment? I found that really powerful because, you know, sometimes meditation doesn't always fit in with a schedule, but you can always make time to just write a couple of pages out on a journal with your coffee, whatever, you can always do it. And I found that where, how, thanks, really, really helpful. And it's the same as you said, that you, again, do it, don't judge it, but then you look back after 10 days or a month of doing it, and then you'll look at your where and you'll start to see 3 or 4 things that are consistent throughout. Oh, that's important to me.
Yeah.
And then you see something like, I don't know, you watched a YouTube video and you're like, oh, I want to like start this business and I'm going to do a clothing brand. And you wrote it 1 day or twice and you're like, okay, I probably, that's not actually important to me. Yeah. But I found that it's a real good way of over time to refine like your direction and refine clarity in your life and build a vision. And what practices do you do?
It varies all the time. At the moment, there's a lot of bioenergetics, which is the thing I mentioned earlier, which are physical exercises to release deeply held tension in the body. Nice. So I'm doing a lot of that at the moment because I've done stretching and yoga teacher training and all that stuff over the years. My body never got any looser because it was holding patterns. It wasn't so much. It was not a flexibility issue. It's the body doesn't feel safe, so the body's tense. That was, so I'm working through bioenergetic stuff at the moment. Do a lot of that. In terms of journaling practices, 2 that I often would encourage that I think are useful based on what we're talking about. One is like people do a to-do list, but it's useful to do a to-be list as well. So who am I going to be today in each of the environments? So you might, I think an important piece we talk about, I think earlier on we were talking about what is it to be free or to be whole. I think it's to have a large range that you can operate from. So you can be a lover with your partner. You can be a warrior when you're in the gym. You can be a hustler when you're at work, whatever it is. But you've got these different parts of yourself you can tune into because most people's kind of range is very small. They've got one way of operating. So I would do the to-do list and then beside it the to-be list. So to do, give a lecture to a corporate client. to be. Like, who do I want to be in that moment? I want to be playful. I want to be confident. I want to be inspiring. I don't want to be boring and bland. So that's useful. And the other piece that's useful is, call it collecting confidence. So at the end of each day, 3 questions. I think it came from Dan Sullivan, from Strategic Coach. My 3 wins for the day, why each of those wins are relevant, and then my next action step. So win, I went on a podcast with Tom, why it's relevant, interesting conversation. We both got to learn from one another, hopefully, and maybe we'll reach some people and it could be helpful. What's my next action step? Maybe listen back to the podcast and see, what can be improved upon. Yeah. So you're collecting. I always say it's like, if a kid plays football and there's a parent on the sideline that's always driving them to do more and never acknowledges what they are doing well, the child's self-esteem is going to become diminished. And a lot of entrepreneurs are always, what's next, what's next, what's next, what's next. If you take a breath and ask what happened today before saying what's next, you'll pull that gratitude from yesterday into tomorrow, and you'll start to develop your confidence. Confidence is not based on what's going to happen in the future, or it's based on what's already happened. I'm confident I can tie my shoes because I've done it thousands of times. Not somewhere out there.
What's the most impactful bit of advice you've ever received?
I think I gave myself this advice. I don't know if anyone ever said it to me in this language, but the thing I repeatedly come back to is enjoy the chapter you're in right now. So it's so easy for me to be an expectation. My life should be different. My body should be different. My social circle should be different. My business should be, I'm in the future, I'm in the past, or I'm in my head. And enjoy the chapter you're in right now just means you are exactly where you are. You look the way you look. You are the way you are. You are where you are. All this stuff, soak as much out of it as you can. And then tomorrow will be a new day. And, I remember I travel a lot. I travel like 4 months every year for the last 15 years. And sometimes people would leave comments on my social media and say, it's completely unrelatable, Pat. Try having 4 kids and doing that. And I'm like, well, I don't have 4 kids. I will babysit your kids if you want to go. And it was a jiu-jitsu post when I was training jiu-jitsu. Someone says, you're training jiu-jitsu all the time. Most of us don't get to do that. I'm like, if you want to train jiu-jitsu, I'll look after your kids. But you don't want to train jiu-jitsu. So you're comparing your reality to my reality. If I had 4 kids, that would be the chapter I'm in. And I fully embrace that and I fully own that. So be where you are, do what you can with where you are, I think.
Yeah, our souls chose this path. There's lessons along the way.
And it could all change tomorrow, for good or for bad. So that'll be a new experience.
How can people get closer into your world, and how can they grab the book and kind of dive deeper into everything we've spoken about?
Thank you, man. Just come to Bali and hang out with me and Tom. No, thank you for welcoming and supporting you've been since I've got here. It's been great, man.
It's been a pleasure, brother. Yeah.
Thank you. PatDivilly.com is my website. I'm on Instagram. I have the book coming out, Shadow Work. And that's kind of it, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, man. That was so much fun. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
That was good.